welcome to episode 2 of the Strange and Deadly Show. My name's Tom Elliott.
And my name is Chris Clayton.
Chris, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, old bean. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. Good to be back. We've had episode 1 out there for a little bit now, and we've got some good feedback off people. How's it been for you?
It's been nice, it was quite worrying to me, having not done anything really in the podcasting field for about 5 or 6 years. So it was nice to get the first one done, to listen back to it, to finish it, and to hear back from a couple of people that we sent it to. And of course, by the time this one comes out, a whole load of you will have heard the first one, and you'll be getting ready for this. And the feedback has been really, really good. So I'm very, very happy.
Just a reminder to everyone of what actually we're doing here. Our mission statement for the moment is that we are reviewing each and every one of what they call the Section 3 films, the films that didn't quite make the video nasties list, but would often be seized and destroyed, but didn't actually get prosecuted in the same way as the video nasties. And it's a list of 82 films, quite diverse, which I think is what I like about it. There's a lot of different things on there, and I think this week really illustrates that.
Tom, do you think the reason why those films are featured on the Section 3 list is because they're really, really shit?
There's a good possibility with the film we watched last week that it might be absolutely right there. The coppers went into the shops and picked it up and said, I'm having this.
Yeah, I mean, I really love that as well, that it's such a diverse list of films, that it's... And there are quite a few on there that I think both you and I are fans of, and a whole bunch that we've never seen before.
Last time on the podcast, 2 weeks ago for most listeners, because it is a 2-weekly podcast, we hit a bit of a rough spot with White Cannibal Queen, or Cannibals as it's known in the UK. But I think things will hopefully be looking up this week. So what have we got planned this week, Chris?
After White Cannibal Queen, after the experience we had, absolutely dreadful. If you've not heard that episode, go back and listen to it, because it's a corker. It really is. White Cannibal Queen, Jess Franco. But for this week, we decided we do a sort of thematic thing. We don't always do it, but at the moment we're pairing two films with a specific theme. And for this episode, we thought, why not pair up two David Cronenberg films? Of course, one of the great masters of horror. And that's what we're going to be doing on this episode, is talking about two David Cronenberg classics.
I wouldn't say I'm a uber Cronenberg fan because I haven't seen all of his work, but I think if you like cinema, you can't help but be interested in David Cronenberg and see what he's got to do.
One of the things I love about him and his work is that it's quite cerebral and intelligent. And I've always felt with Cronenberg that he's not, unlike, say, Sean Cunningham or someone like that, or Wes Craven, who are good directors in their own right. I mean, you and I both love the Friday the 13th films and Nightmare on Elm Street. But I feel like those directors, the films that they made, some of their most famous films, they were made because they were, I suppose, kind of riding a particular train, a particular wave, which was the slasher trend. And I've always felt that they sort of made films for teenagers. As we have grown up, they've crossed over. But I feel like David Cronenberg has always made films for grown-ups. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Again, we're going back to quite early in his career here. And same way when we talked about Cannibal, you could see Ruggero Deodato building up his sort of cinematic vocabulary. And it's the same here when you look at these films that we're going to be talking about today. It's Cronenberg learning his craft, getting his stuff together. And now he makes things like, what was the Viggo Mortensen one? History of Violence. Mm-hmm. Great film. I loved his film Spider.
One of his more recent films, I really loved Eastern Promises, which was like a Russian gangster movie. Completely, I mean, we'll probably get into it later on, but completely different from what he was doing early on. I should say that the films that we're going to be talking about in this episode are Rabid and Scanners, both two fairly early films, both films that I've seen before. Tom, you'd seen Rabid, but you hadn't seen Scanners before, is that right?
That's right. Always known of it, but never got round to seeing it.
Can't wait to hear what your opinion is on that one. As far as other examples there, you were asking me what I'm into. I guess it's not a film that's talked about very much, but there was one that he made called Existence.
Oh, yeah.
Which again plays with the body horror. Now, at that point, he's sort of moving away from that a bit. But still making really, really intelligent movies. And that's ultimately, I love a director. I mean, look, I love directors who are really bad, who make bad movies. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a hipster about it, but I do like a smart director. It's one of the reasons why I really like Christopher Nolan, for example.
Yeah.
And it's the same with David Cronenberg. I still feel like he makes really smart movies.
So I guess a good way to start is let's have a bit of background on him.
Absolutely. Well, he was born in Toronto, Canada in 1943. He moved into filmmaking in the mid-60s. His earliest work was comprised primarily of TV movies, shorts, and episodes of TV shows. But it wasn't until 1975's Shivers that the king of body horror officially set off on his journey as one of the great masters of the genre. He followed Shivers with Rabid in 1977 and then proceeded to make a number of interesting cerebral sci-fi horror movies. Mainstream success found him with his widely acclaimed remake of The Fly in 1986 with the brilliant Jeff Goldblum, and he has continued making challenging films up till today. Once known for exploring the twisting and turning of human flesh, he has in recent years moved into different genres, and his horror work has, for the most part, been left behind, with films like A History of Violence and Eastern Promises, offering up a very different side of a very unique director. His frequent collaborations with actor Viggo Mortensen have helped to shape both men and their careers into something else entirely.
Well, let's kick off then by looking at that second film, which is Rabid from 1977. Both written and directed by Cronenberg. And Rabid tells the story of Rose, played by Marilyn Chambers, a young woman who is badly injured in a motorcycle accident at the beginning of the film. Rendered comatose, she's rushed to the clinic of Dr. Dan Keloid, played by Howard Reichpan. Is that how you say it?
I think so, yeah.
A plastic surgeon who has been experimenting with morphogenic skin tissue. Faced with little choice, Dr. Keloid grafts the experimental tissue onto Rose's injuries, and a month passes while he and his medical team await signs of any improvement. Sure enough, Rose's skin tissue begins to heal rapidly, and she soon awakes from her coma. But unbeknownst to the doctor or anyone else, a mysterious orifice has opened in her armpit that houses a strange parasitic stinger. Her thirst for blood gradually grows and grows, and the hunger is sated by piercing anyone she can find to get close to. As her vampiric tendencies grow, an even bigger threat emerges from her actions. Every victim she's bitten becomes infected and violent, turning rabid and wild and spreading the infection to anyone they should happen to bite. Rose escapes from the hospital, unaware of the madness that begins to hit the streets as more and more people become infected. Only Hart Reed, played by Frank Moore, her boyfriend who survived the motorcycle accident, can put the pieces together as he searches helplessly for Rose amidst a city now rife with chaos and a growing pile of bodies.
Rosie! Rosie, sweetie, take it easy. You need that juice, sweetie. It's keeping you alive.
What are you,
That's a girl.
what are you doing? Are we all right?
I'm not Hart, Rosie. Hart's back in Montreal waiting for you. I'm Lloyd. I'm a friend of yours.
Hart?
Hart's back in Montreal waiting for you.
Oh, I guess I was dreaming.
I don't think you were just dreaming. You and Hart were in a really spectacular motorcycle crash.
Crash?
Yes. You're bleeding right now. I'd better get Dr. Keloid.
Oh, no, don't go. I'm all right, really. I'm freezing cold. Oh, you're so warm.
Look, I better...
Hold me. Please. I'm dying of the cold. Oh, God, that feels so...
Look, you don't even know where you are, do you?
Oh, God.
Look, this is really weird. Are you sure you know what you're... Hey, I think I cut myself or something. Get a knife or something in there with...
You like a mysterious orifice, don't you, mate?
Who doesn't?
Yeah, by the way, it's not Howard Rishpan, it's Howard Dustpan. Shall I carry on?
Yes, please do.
Yes, Rabid. I've seen this film before. I have to say, I think it's a solid film. I think it's rough around the edges. You can tell that when Cronenberg made it, he didn't have a lot of money to play with, but that's okay. Some of the better independent movies, you don't need a lot of money as long as you use the money you have quite creatively. I think he does that here. It's a solid watch. I don't think it's great. I think but I think it plays with some interesting ideas, and that's something that Cronenberg would continue to do. He did it in Shivers. Have you seen Shivers?
A long time ago. Don't really remember it too well. I remember how it ends. Is that the one that ends in the swimming pool?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. But I haven't seen that for a very. It actually came with my copy of Rabid. It came in like a double pack.
I see.
And I remember more from Rabid than I do from Shivers. But what I do definitely remember about Shivers is that these two films, they kind of work together because they explore similar themes. Very much, a lot of Cronenberg's early work was about exploring the idea of sexuality, but infusing it with this incredibly dark, the horrific idea of something that is underneath your skin and can protrude from it. And that's exactly what Rabid does.
I think I'm of a similar mind that it is a solid watch. I do have a couple of issues, not so much issues, but observations that I guess we'll get to as we go along. But yeah, it's a solid watch. It shares DNA with. It reminds me of Let's Talk About 28 Days Later. It's sort of a zombie film that isn't quite a zombie film. It's like if someone tries to say, well, zombies aren't really that plausible, so let's think of a more plausible reason for the zombies to exist. Now, I'm not quite sure how plausible this is in the way they present how the epidemic starts, and we will talk about that. But a sort of rabid disease is, a bit more believable than a zombie.
To get into the meat of it, as you were saying in the plot summary there, so you got Rose, played by Marilyn Chambers. She, as a result of the skin grafts that they've done, the tissue that they've replaced, she has this sort of phallic stinger that protrudes from underneath her armpit, and you only really see that. You see that she has this kind of it looks like a vagina, and I think that's what he was going for, because that's the sort of guy that David Cronenberg is. He was sort of very much trying to, those are the sexual undertones. They're there, and it very much looks like a vagina, and there's some sort of parasite underneath there. They never. There's no specific explanation as to why that stinger, I guess, feeding upon somebody. Because you were mentioning a zombie movie there, and I agree that's very much in there. But also, there's something quite vampiric about the character, I think, and about the stinger and what it does. The fact that once she wakes up from the coma, and she pretty much attacks a guy almost immediately. She now finds that, because there are a couple of scenes in there where she tries to eat normal food and she throws up immediately, and she realizes, I guess, or I don't even know if she's really that cognizant of what's happening to her, but she just seems to know that she needs to feed, and she does it through this stinger. But like I said, there's no specific explanation about exactly why the stinger, first of all, what it actually does, and second of all, why it causes her victims to then, they sort of fall unconscious and then get up, and now all of a sudden they're rabid and they need to attack other people. There's no specific explanation, is there?
I do kind of go with the movie and what it's trying to do, but when I sat and thought about it, it's a special solution that they soak. Correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but the solution is, let's say you take skin from a certain area of the body, you put it in this solution, then you can use it on any other part of the body. So you could take skin off someone's leg and put it on their face, and this solution will make it adapt. Is that right?
That seems to be what it is, yeah. I mean, I don't think he's playing with any great logical, viable science.
But okay, so I'll get that. I understand that. That's what he's doing. It's just the growth of this strange little opening with its sort of tiny phallic parasite popping out. The connection between the two just isn't there. The two things, if you think about it too much, it's like, well, it doesn't really make any sense at all.
I think you're just upset because you want one, mate. and there's no Doctor, what's his name, Dr. Kelloyd around for you to get one. But I could put you on a motorbike and sort of push you into a river or something.
Well, we'll give that a try.
Episode 3?
Episode 3,
Excellent.
that's...
Right, we're going live, guys. We're going to record on the scene. But no, seriously, I understand what you're saying. There's no sort of communication between whatever it is and her. There's no explanation as to why this thing happens to communicate with her and what it tells her and how it affects her mind. There really doesn't seem to be any explanation there. Having said that, there's no explanation in Night of the Living Dead really as to why the dead are coming back to life. So it's one of those things that I think I can let go perhaps a little bit easier than you, in the sense that there's a little bit of mystery shrouding it, but also I think sometimes mystery can work very well in a horror movie.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a deal breaker for me. I pause for thought, I think, and then I just go with it. But it's interesting that there's a short 10-minute chat with Cronenberg on the DVD about it, and he says, and he pretty much explains that part of the plot. So, they develop this stuff and she gets this thing on her shoulder. And he even said, it sounds ridiculous as I'm saying it now, and he said back when he was making it, there was a point on the set where he just kind of had a moment of clarity when he said, this absolutely makes no fucking sense, and he said to the producer or whoever was close by, this just doesn't make any sense, it's not going to work, and whoever it was said, no, just go with it, it's going to be fine, and so he did, and it was okay.
That's right. I watched that too, actually, and I kind of feel like if Cronenberg can excuse it, I can too, on that particular point. Now I have to say, moving forward, going through the plot, I mean, how do you feel that I personally feel that it dragged a bit at the beginning, but once Rose escapes from the hospital, I thought the pace of it was I thought it moved along quite swiftly.
I'm of a different mind, I think. I think the beginning I found was moved along quite nicely. And when you look at that, the thing about Cronenberg for me is when he does violence, he makes you feel it, I don't think he's quite mastered it yet here, but there are moments of it. And when Rose crashes on the bike and she's trapped underneath the bike, the way she struggles, that's very Cronenberg for me.
Yeah.
So that kind of opening scenes and the operation and so on, and their first couple of victims, I find that works quite well for me. But it starts to drag for me a bit more in the middle. So I think we're a bit opposites on that one.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I have to say, as far as the violence goes, I agree with you that he's nowhere near his peak at this point. I personally think that I don't want to say peak because he's still a very viable and interesting director, but for me, when you get to The Fly, I think that's when you're really looking at it, taking it up to a whole other level. But I have to say, I thought that this film, having not seen it for at least, I mean, it must be 6 or 7 years now since I bought the DVD set, maybe even longer, I'm not sure. I found it to be quite brutal, not super gory, but I just found it to be quite brutal, and there was a feeling in there of absolute hopelessness. I mean, when we talk about the ending, we'll kind of get to that, because I feel like the film, the way that it's capped off at the end there, I really do get that sense of gloominess about the story and where it's going, which I think is something that Cronenberg does very well. But I have to say again that I think we are kind of on at opposite ends as far as that goes. But I do agree with you that this is nowhere near being his best. But there is some promise here.
Oh, there absolutely is. There absolutely is. And like I say, it's a good, solid film. But I think what it comes down to for me is the opening stretch of the film. We've got our first couple of kills, and we've got the guy who she first sees when she awakes. Then there's the guy who tries to rape her and he gets the kind of thing in his eye and so on. All good stuff. I think the problem for me is, on that interview we spoke about, Cronenberg says that in this he's a bit more of an action director. It's a city under siege, this plague is spreading and so on. The problem for me is I didn't really feel that escalation. Now, it could be down to budget, that he couldn't have hundreds of rabid people running around. That might be why. When the problem was escalating, I just didn't feel that it was. He had a scene where there were people queuing up for some reason. There were soldiers going around, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it never felt citywide for me. It never felt like an epidemic. I just don't think that escalation was there.
Oh, Tom, we're not going to agree on anything as far as this one goes, because I very much felt that sense of escalation. I thought from where it began to where it finished, excluding sort of the last shot because it's a different sort of thing, but I thought that it descended into chaos as you went along. Obviously you didn't feel that way, and it's okay to be wrong, but but no response to that. No response to you being wrong.
Mate, if it works for you, it works for you, and that's fine. But I just don't think that scale was there. It feels like there was only money to do so much, and they tried to make it look bigger than it actually was. But when there was that line up around that building and there was army guys there, it felt like they cordoned off a couple of blocks. It didn't feel like this was happening everywhere.
Sure, I mean, I can agree with you on that, but then I also think about the fact that it was, like you were saying, that he didn't have a lot of money to play with, and at the end of the day, I wasn't expecting, as much as I would have liked it to have felt bigger in scale. I do feel like at the end of the day, this was only his. I mean, he'd been making movies long before this, really, but this was only his second horror movie, really pushing himself into the industry and making a name for himself and becoming somewhat notable. And I do feel like, certainly it's absolutely fine to feel that there's no sense of escalation there. I do feel like he should be forgiven at least a little bit for not having enough money to be able to afford to have sort of big riots going on in the streets. But certainly I think that if that had been happening, that would have made it feel bigger and perhaps make the chaos feel more alive. So I agree with you on that.
Good. Well, I'm glad we agree on something. Let's talk about our leading lady then.
The film is very notable for featuring porn star Marilyn Chambers as the main character Rose. This was her first and only legitimate film role. Now that's according to Cronenberg on the documentary. I think she made a couple of movies that weren't porn related, so I'm not sure he's right about that. Look, there are probably people listening to this who are wanking off as we speak, so I don't want to speak ill of them, Tom.
There's probably people recording this who are wanking off as we speak.
Absolutely, yeah, you could hear that. That's what all that squelching is in the background, Tom. Yes. Okay, so despite not wanting to insult fans of porn and label the things they like as illegitimate, I do feel that this is probably her only legit film role, if you know what I mean, as a piece of cinema. Cronenberg was quite surprised to find out that rather than capitalise on her potential as an actress, she sort of went straight back into porn after this and continued in the industry for decades after him. But before I discuss her, I should say that she did pass away in 2009 from a cerebral hemorrhage and an aneurysm related to heart disease. So that's sad. She went, quite a way before her time. As far as what she's like in the movie, I think she's competent. I think you can tell in a few spots that she's unsure of herself.
She has a very girl next door quality about her, which is ironic considering what kind of films she's normally in. But I certainly wouldn't say she's any worse than a Farrah Fawcett or something like that of the time. Beautiful girl, can act. Probably isn't going to win any awards, but you'll happily sit and watch her.
Yeah, I sort of think that some of her reactions to what's happening inside her as well, because she's quite fitful at various points in the movie. I feel that her reactions are quite good. When she has dialogue to say, I think you can tell in some spots in the movie that it's not quite right, that there's a certain texture that's missing from that you and if you compare, I know it's a strange comparison to have to make, but if you compare it to somebody like Michael Ironside from Scanners, which we're going to talk about later, there's a kind of texture to an actor who's good, and I feel like she doesn't have that. Having said that, I do think there was potential there, and I'm quite surprised. I mean, I guess there's a lot of money in porn, and perhaps she felt that, well, look, at the end of the day, a very small horror movie by a director that hardly anybody knows at that time, perhaps I shouldn't sort of hedge my bets on that and hinge everything I do for the rest of my career on a dream that might not come true, when I can stay in porn and make a lot of money. So maybe that's the reason it never quite happened for her. But I thought she was fine.
You talk about that texture that an actor has or hasn't got. And I agree that she didn't particularly have it, but I think her as a person does have a quality, a sweetness, if you will, that makes me like watching her. And purely for research purposes, I have looked at some of her other work
Yeah.
after I watched this, and it makes me a bit sad, to be honest, because she worked in porn for a while and then she retired, but I think probably for financial reasons she came back to it in her late 40s, maybe early 50s, and I watched that, and it's quite heartbreaking to watch it because obviously she's an older woman now, and that's fine, but I just felt kind of sorry for her.
You dirty bleeder. You should be ashamed of yourself, boy. I tell you. I do agree with you, though, that she passed away way too young. I don't, to be honest with you, I should have noted down. I don't know at what age she passed away, but it was too early.
It was in her 50s.
Right, so yeah, so far too early. Still a babe as far as I'm concerned, age-wise. And may I say, also a very beautiful girl. I didn't do the research, guys, because I'm a wholesome young man. But Tom took up the mantle for that. And as I understand it, mate, her most famous film, Behind the Green Door, you own 3 very sticky copies of that, don't you? Can I just say something, guys? This is between you and me, the listener, not me and Tom. He's not listening at the moment. Tom Elliott, spunk like glue.
Sorry, did you just say something?
No, just looking over there. Waiting for you, mate.
So what about the overall kind of, I don't know, Cronenberg just doesn't make a film. He's always saying something, isn't he? I mean, what's he saying with this little vampiric armpit vagina? I mean, what do you think he's saying with that?
I think there's a lot of, I think it sort of subtly tackles the AIDS epidemic, which was rampant at the time. I think there's a lot of that in there. I think there's a lot about, he covers a lot of ground throughout his career. I think early on, a lot of it was about sex, about the idea of sex. I think he had a fascination with sex, with the body, the way the body responds, in the midst of an orgasm or when you're having sex, or the phallic nature of sex, and orifices and all these different things. I think all of these things are covered by Cronenberg as you go along. I think here it's quite interesting that he chose to make the orifice basically a vagina. I think he's saying a lot, but I think he says a lot, and a lot of very intelligent things in the guise of what is essentially a B movie.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge subtext guy. Sometimes I can see it, sometimes I can't. It's interesting in that interview he gave that he talks about the subtext getting away with him. Kind of, sometimes you make something and you want it to say one thing, but it ends up saying another. And he was talking about something, because it's a Canadian film. He is a Canadian. It was made in Montreal. Something called the FLQ crisis. I don't know what that is. I haven't had time to look it up.
No.
But something happened anyway where the army was on the streets in, I think it was something to do with Quebec or Montreal trying to get its independence from the rest of Canada,
right,
or something like that. And things broke down, and there was troops on the streets, that sort of thing. And he said that's what he was going for. And I guess good art does this. It can say a lot of things. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily start out meaning to say them, but it can work on a lot of levels.
I really think that that's what David Cronenberg does best. So anyway, mate, what are your thoughts on Frank Moore, who played Hart Reed, Rose's boyfriend? He's basically the male lead in the film, if you like.
He has a familiar face. I must have seen him in something else before, but I can't quite place him.
Yeah.
He's okay, I don't think he's particularly great. I can't really say much about him, to be honest. He's there, but I don't think he's that pivotal to the whole thing.
Yeah, I have to say that I think you have been a bit kinder towards him than I would be. I thought that through most of this he looked half asleep. I didn't think that he contributed very much to it. It's almost as if he's supposed to be, like I was saying, the male lead in the movie, but really I find that his story, it exists alongside what's going on with Rose. I never really feel like the two intersect until right near the end. Even then, the only time he really emotes is in sort of the final scene. Well, not really the final scene, but right near the end where he confronts Rose, who's killed her best friend in her apartment. And he comes in there and he starts shouting at her, and then Rose ends up locking herself in, and we are going to offer spoilers here, by the way, guys. I probably should have mentioned that, but this film is like 30 years old, so I feel we can do it legitly. But yeah, basically, Hart tells her that she is the reason for this epidemic. She's the one who caused it. He works that out fairly quickly after seeing her, and she ends up locking herself in with somebody that she has attacked. Basically, that person ends up waking up and attacks her and kills her. And while that's going on, she's on the phone with Hart, and we can hear him in histrionics. And I feel like that's really towards the end of the film the only time that he emotes. I wasn't that sold on him, I have to say, echoing something that I will probably say about the lead actor in Scanners. I feel like there's not a lot of charisma there.
And the one time he did need to emote, it almost seemed a bit over the top, where he smashed the phone up and stuff. And I'm sure that was in the script as well, but he did just sort of totally lose it in a not particularly convincing way. So yeah, I'll agree with you on that one.
Yeah, but that when he does that at the end, I thought that's a moment where Cronenberg needs to come in and say, look, you need to rein it in. I also have to say, for Hart Reed, for the character himself, if you're going to be driving on a motorcycle with your girlfriend on the back, and there's a huge caravan that can quite obviously be seen from quite a large distance away. I mean, it's not as if it snuck up on them. It was a straight road, and when they're driving towards the car, because the way that the motorcycle accident actually happens, if any of you out there haven't seen the movie, the motorbike, basically there's a caravan that's broken down with a guy with a tremendous moustache, almost as good as the guy who used to be the mascot on our Strange and Deadly Twitter account, Tom.
Surely not.
Do you reckon it's him?
It could be.
Could be, couldn't it? That's where he ended up. But so the caravan, it turns around in the road, so it's basically blocking the road. And Hart and Rose they're on the motorbike, and they crash. They don't really crash into the caravan, but they end up sort of going up a ramp, and off the motorcycle goes, and it ends up on top of Rose. And I do think that you're a bit negligent, mate. You should be. He's looking at his dick when he's running. You should be looking at the road. I'm very upset with this man.
So, final thoughts on Rabid? Do you recommend it?
I do. I don't think that it's anywhere near his best work. I think that's to come. But I have to say, I think it's a solid watch. I would recommend, actually, because it's available on DVD. You can buy it separately. I think it's about £5 or £6 on Amazon, or you can get it as part of a double pack with Shivers. Now Shivers is also available on Blu-ray, so pick your poison there. But I would recommend maybe grabbing the double pack with Shivers, and you've got two nice sort of early Cronenberg classics, if you like. I mean, I don't personally think Rabid is a classic as such, but I think there's some good stuff in there. I just like to see the progression of a really good director, somebody, so where they begin and then where they end up later. And I feel like if you watch Rabid, even though it's rough around the edges, it's spiky, we both disagree in terms of the amount of energy that's in there, but certainly it's missing some of the best qualities of some of his better work. I still think that you can see there are sort of threads of the Cronenberg that we would come to see later on, and for that it's worth a watch.
I can't really add anything to that, to be honest. You're right, it's on an academic level, seeing Cronenberg build up his vocabulary, it's definitely worth a watch, and it's enjoyable, solid film. Will I watch it again? It's more of a channel changer, change the channel, oh, Rabid's on, I'll watch it, then I would actually sit down and put the DVD on again, I think. But no, it's a good, solid movie, and I'd recommend it as well.
Yeah, you will watch it again, mate. I'm going to knock you the fuck out and tie you to a seat, and then I'm going to pry your eyelids open with toothpicks, and then I'm going to make you watch it until you agree with my opinion.
Okay. So what are we watching next?
So we are moving on to another film here, a film that I've seen a number of times, and you haven't, Tom, so I'm going to look very much forward to your opinion on it. But for now, let me give you the rundown on this one. This is Scanners from 1981. Again, written and directed by David Cronenberg. He's a prolific man. Let me give you the plot. So, the film opens with a homeless man walking through a shopping mall and picking at bits of leftover food on the tables of a restaurant. He sits down to eat and is observed by two women who are audibly dismissive of him and the way he looks. Soon after, one of the women begins to fall over, seemingly ill. It turns out that the man, who we soon learn is named Cameron Vale, played by Stephen Lack, has telekinetic powers that give him the ability to affect someone else's body and mind. Vale is captured by agents from ConSec, a medical facility that also happens to be conducting research on people just like Cameron. Known as scanners, there are a number of individuals out in the wild who are able to control people telepathically, but one in particular has ConSec's attention. His name is Daryl Revok, played by Michael Ironside, a rogue scanner who wishes to kill the members of ConSec and build a scanner army. Revok kills a fellow scanner at a conference and is captured, but manages to escape and is officially on the run. Cameron soon learns via information supplied to him by Dr. Paul Ruth, played by Patrick McGoohan, a scientist with incredible interest in scanners and their abilities, that he's been brought in and cleaned up so that he might track down Revok and take him out before his destructive abilities claim any more lives. The key to Vale's compliance is a drug named ephemeral, which can suppress the busy thoughts of a scanner and provides clarity and rest. So, Vale heads out in search of Revok, finding clues and dead bodies as he looks for answers. He meets up with a fellow allied group of scanners led by Kim Obrist, played by Jennifer O'Neill, who lends Vale a more sympathetic ear. Peace does not stay with them for long, however, as it transpires that Revok has been searching for Vale too, and will stop at nothing and spare no one in order to find him. As the two prepare for an almighty clash, Vale searches for answers to who he is and where the powerful scanners came from.
You're 35 years old, Mr. Vale. Why are you such a derelict, such a piece of human junk? The answer's simple. You're a scanner, which you don't realize. And that has been the source of all your agony. But I will show you now that it can be a source of great power.
Now, my friend, like I said before, I've seen this maybe 4 or 5 times previously. You never have. Tell me, what did you think of it?
I think the thing with Scanners is that even if you've never seen it, you know of it because of that one famous scene that is actually quite early on in the movie, which is the head exploding scene, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's always on best of lists, you know, scariest moments in film, TV shows, that sort of thing, or what, you know, whatever. You can't not know about the head exploding scene, even if you've never seen the film. And that was me. I was always aware of it, and there's that box set out for years. It's probably still knocking around with the 3 films in a box set, and I always meant to pick it up. I probably did own it at one point and then just never got round to watching it and flogged it. So I've always meant to get round to it. I didn't quite know what it was beyond the head exploding scene, and I think what's interesting is that's in pretty much the first act of the movie, isn't it?
Yeah.
When that guy's head explodes, and I was expecting it to be more of the climax, and I was quite shocked to see them sort of blow their loads quite early on.
Yeah, I have to say, and I think you're probably in agreement on this, because you and I, we love our head explosions, I think. I don't mean that in some sort of homosexual way. We are both you and I are fans of Maniac, the classic film, and there's that brilliant scene in there where Tom Savini essentially shoots himself, blows his own head off with a shotgun, or rather blows his head open, and it's an amazing effect. I would say that this perhaps rivals that. I think it's just an amazing effect. I think it was, and I've actually got a piece of information, it was achieved by filling a latex head with dog food and rabbit livers, and the head was then shot from behind with a 12-gauge shotgun. So it's a very practical way of doing an effect. It's one of the reasons why I will always love practical effects. I think you can tell that it's a dummy head, but I still think that it's very effective. I have to say, in that particular scene, there's one thing that put me off, which I've never noticed before. I guess because I'm older now and therefore slightly more observant of things. I have to say, if you watch that scene, it's a scene in which Michael Ironside's character Revok, he is sitting there next to a guy who's also a scanner. We don't really know anything about that guy, but he's picked someone from the audience, and he's going to demonstrate his scanning abilities on this person. Well, this person turns out to be Revok, who up to that point we don't know that he is the villain, and he somehow finds a way to duel with him, and he makes this guy's head explode. When you watch the head explosion, there is blood and flesh, brains everywhere. It sort of splays out. It's a beautiful shot. But when you look at Michael Ironside in the next shot, there is not a speck of blood on him. What's up with that?
Maybe he used his psychic ability to keep the blood off him. I don't know.
You're a genius.
I'm making excuses for the film now.
I think you are, but I think that was a bit of an oversight. You're absolutely right, though. You can't not know about scanners. I think if you've done any research into horror, if you're getting into it even in a moderate fashion, I think you would know. And yeah, certainly that effect is quite remarkable.
I agree. It does rival the Maniac shot. I slightly prefer Maniac. I think they pull off the reality of it just slightly better.
Yeah.
There isn't that split second of, oh, it's a dummy, but it doesn't matter. It's still a great shot, and I think that's what you need with a movie like this, because there's times in the movie where it's just people pulling funny faces at each other. So there always needs to be a payoff, I think, and a lot of the time they do. There is some sort of money shot, if you like. Otherwise, it is just people pulling faces at each other. But they've sort of used the best one at first, and you could say, well, maybe they should have saved it till later, but up until this point we don't know what's going on. Well, I didn't, and bang, there it is. What a great way to just shock the audience.
It's a pretty visceral introduction, isn't it, into this particular world, and I do think that in a way it missells the film, because I think I can almost guarantee that was probably used in a lot of promo, and certainly in some trailers, or maybe not. They probably couldn't get away with showing the whole thing, but it's a very famous scene. I almost think that if you look at that scene, if you just take it as it is, as a separate entity, as an individual thing, and you expect the rest of the film to be like that, I think you'd be quite disappointed, because the rest of it really veers more into sci-fi, I think. Yeah. And the horror is kind of reserved really for that scene, and then again at the end it comes through a bit of the gore and there are some really cool effects later on, which we'll probably talk about. But I have to agree with you. They blow their load early, I think.
What I like about it is that they just drop you into this world of the scanners. They don't spoon feed you from the get-go. This is what a scanner is. This is where we are. You're just sort of dropped right into the thick of things. And I like that. I like that sort of... it's a very 70s thing to do. These days, you tend to find things are a bit more straightforward. But I think it did that quite well. Just drops you into that world and then gives you bits of information to clarify where we are and what we're doing.
A lot of modern horror movies, and especially remakes, there is this feeling that the creators, the directors, the writers, they want to demystify the story, demystify the killer. So, for example, not to get into a big rant about this because you'll have me going for days, but taking like the Rob Zombie Halloween remake, for example, and giving Michael Myers a reason for why he is what he is, I feel like, it's a different kind of movie, of course, but what I mean by that is there is this feeling that we have to explain the origin behind things. And I do feel like certainly Rabid did it to some extent, and also I feel like with this one, you're not spoon-fed everything from the get-go. And by doing it that way, I feel like just drip-feeding you a little bit of information here and there, and you sort of put it together in your brain, in the same way that you would something like Inception, for example, the Christopher Nolan movie, where Christopher Nolan... Again, a very different kind of movie. I don't mean to sort of compare it to that, but he's the kind of director who, when he made that movie, his goal with it was to say, okay, well, look, at the end of the day, I feel that you are a lot smarter than Hollywood gives you credit for. Therefore, I will put these pieces together, and they're fairly easy to assemble, but they're in an order that perhaps is not so easy to work out. But I will leave it with you, and I feel quite confident that you'll be able to work it out and build up your own picture. And I appreciate when a director doesn't treat me like a fool. So we've got that very famous scene that we spoke about that we like, which is the exploding head. they capture Revok, who, as it turns out, is going to be the villain of this movie, and we're then left with Cameron Vale, played by Stephen Lack. Now, first of all, how did you feel about Stephen Lack as an actor?
I think I know where you're going to go with this,
Uh-huh.
because he is very similar to the chap in Rabid, isn't he? I think the reason why they probably chose him is he has got quite distinctive eyes.
I agree.
You know, there's a certain look about his eyes that they probably think a guy who's using psychic abilities should have. Maybe the rest of his presence doesn't quite match up.
Yeah, I think he's got quite a distinctive look, but I don't feel like there's very much else that's there. I think there's a whole lot of nothing coming from him. Now, I have to say, maybe it's unfair to compare him to these actors, but when you consider that David Cronenberg in the 80s would go on to work with James Woods, Christopher Walken, Jeff Goldblum, Jeremy Irons in Dead Ringers, these are all actors who I feel have got a charismatic. I feel they can carry a movie very well, and I think Stephen Lack. It's probably. I mean, if you look at his IMDb credits, there's not a tremendous amount of work there. So I would guess that acting was probably not a major passion for him. Whereas those actors that I listed are very much actors. I also think that in this movie he's out acted by Michael Ironside, who I've always liked.
I always love Michael Ironside as well. Whatever he can make a watchable, he's watchable even in some of the crap movies he's in. But you mentioned Walken there. Could you imagine Christopher Walken in this role? He would have killed
He
it.
would, wouldn't he? Because there's a weird kind of alien quality to Christopher Walken that I think would have been just as effective. But he's got that extra oomph to him that I think Stephen Lack lacks.
Hey.
Hey, come on, boy. But yeah, no, I was not that fond of him. I don't mean to be. Look, I mean, I really like both of these movies, and I guess I'm giving it away. I'm a fan of Scanners. I do like the movie a lot, and so I'm trying not to be too harsh towards the film, and I try not to be too harsh towards Stephen Lack, to be honest. But I don't feel that, much like Frank Moore, I don't feel that these are great actors, and I feel like Cronenberg would go on to work with actors who are much better later on, and I feel like that needs to be said. But I don't feel it takes away too much from the movie.
I can still enjoy the movie. I think something I noticed quite early on as well, it's all like 30, 40-year-old guys. You know, there's no sort of youthful people in it with interesting faces. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm a huge fan of The Prisoner, the TV show. I absolutely love Patrick McGoohan.
I've never seen it, mate, to be honest with you.
You've never seen The Prisoner?
No, I haven't. I've always wanted to see it.
For anyone who hasn't seen it out there, it's a great British TV show. Very quirky, very unique for its time. I think Patrick McGoohan was the best Bond we never had, to be honest. He was Daniel Craig for, the kind of 60s, if you like. There was always talk of him playing Bond, I think, back in those days, replacing Sean Connery, but it never came to pass. But he did, in his way, play Bond-type characters in a TV show called Danger Man,
right?
And then he went on to do The Prisoner. He made a good hard case, very, very smart as well, though, and he carries a lot of weight for me in roles, and I think he does in this. And he's dead now. I don't know how old he was when he died, but I think he lived to a good age. But it's a shame he's not around, because I think the parts that Anthony Hopkins plays nowadays, Patrick McGoohan would also have been really good in as well. I mean, are you familiar with him for anything other than this?
I believe so. I have to be honest, it's probably nothing I could name. I think he's one of those actors who I've seen in things, but I certainly do not have anywhere near the amount of knowledge that you do about him. I can only tell you that as a fan of this movie, and probably this being the most major role I've seen him in, which I'm sure is a crime to people who love the Prisoner, but I have to say that I think he's a real authority on this, isn't he? He's part of the old guard, and I think there's a lot of charm there as the sort of, that scientist character, but with a bit of depth to him.
I think when he's on screen, he owns it. That meeting earlier on where they're kind of discussing their Scanners program and what they're going to do, and he's just very calm and laid back, just saying what he thinks, but he still just owns the room.
Yeah, tremendous amount of presence, I think.
So we've kind of established ourselves now. We know who the Scanners are. We know what they can do to a degree, but the movie still surprises us every now and again with different sort of facets of their powers, but we'll get to that in a bit. We've then got this, it's kind of like a Cameron Vale trying to find Revok, and he's going through the motions, if you like, going to from place to place, from person to person.
They send Cameron Vale out basically as an assassin to take Revok out, and I feel that, I mean, I really like Scanners. I do feel like it sags, the pace drops down a bit. See, for me, I know you don't agree with me about Rabid. I feel like Rabid, once it gets going, I personally felt that the energy level was relatively consistent. I feel like Scanners, it peaks and then it ebbs, it peaks and it ebbs, and I do think that the middle section of it, I would have liked to have seen it maybe cut down a little bit, moved along a bit, just have it move along more swiftly, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of Cameron Vale just going from place to place, talking to sort of drab people in drab places, and I think he tries to pepper kind of scenes of him using his ability throughout. That's something else I wanted to bring up as well. Cameron Vale, when we find him, he's a very lost character. He doesn't know particularly who he is or what his powers mean, but he seems to master them pretty damn quickly, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's not a natural progression, is it? It's sort of, he's there for not a very long period of time, and suddenly he's able to control them when he really couldn't before. Yeah, maybe that was not very well developed, I think.
We needed a montage, a mind training montage.
We did, didn't we, with a codpiece in there?
Yeah.
Because I like codpieces, really. It's nothing sexual about it, Tom. You don't have to accuse me of things.
This is what I find quite interesting about it as well. They do kind of blow the money shot early on, but we do see different aspects of their powers throughout the film. They can read people's minds. They can sort of move people, or blast them out of the way if need be. There's a good one later on where the female scanner, I think her name was Kim, was it?
Yes.
She makes one of the security guards think that she's his mother, and that has an effect on him, that sort of thing. So he does use it in quite interesting ways. I think you could probably, if he made it today, he would probably take that to a much further degree. There are some interesting things in there.
During that period of the film, like we said earlier when we were talking about the head explosion, if you're expecting the film to be like that, it really isn't. There's really only some gore effects going on at the beginning there, and then some at the end. But for the rest of it, it sort of veers into being a sci-fi thriller, and we get to see how the powers manifest themselves. I do think that perhaps the display of the powers and what they can actually do is slightly uneven. And like we said, I think that Vale is able to master his powers a bit too quickly for my liking. But I do like the fact that I don't think Cronenberg is the sort of director who ever wants to make quote unquote a gore movie. I don't think that's his scene. I think that what he likes to do is emphasize certain moments with something that that makes you very uncomfortable to watch. And I feel like the middle section of the film, as we move on towards the ending, is very much about, okay, we've gotten that out of the way. I've disgusted you at the beginning. Now let me settle things down and let me actually develop the plot to some degree. That's what I feel like that midsection really does, incorporating the powers in there, what they actually do, and then we discover more about the plot, discover exactly what's happening. There's this program called RIPE, which is this secret sort of operation that's going on. That is, there's an insider at Consec, and we discover it to be a particular character. He's revealed quite early on, actually. I think he's a dodgy guy. There's this RIPE program that's going on. Towards the sort of back end of the film, as we're getting towards the finale of it, we get kind of what we've been waiting for, really, which is the duel, the final confrontation between Vale and Revok. And we get some revelations there. We discover from Revok that Vale is actually his brother. How did you feel about that twist?
I'll be honest, the way it was delivered, where Revok's like, I'm your brother and Dr. Ruth was our father, I expected him to say Kim was the sister or something, it was just a bit like, bang, 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 bang. But okay, no, it's fine. It makes sense. I guess it might be that these days it's a bit of a cliche, isn't it?
Do you know what, mate? I think that The Empire Strikes Back has ruined it for everybody. I think
Yeah.
I think that revelation, of course, Luke, I am your father. I feel like that is. I don't think you can get away with it now because of that.
That immediately sprung to mind, so it was like, what? Okay. But I'll forgive them it because it's fine, and I actually liked seeing them sit down and have this conversation. It's a very kind of when you have two people of the same ability with different ideologies, I think it makes for great drama. It's Professor X and Magneto. They're different sides of the same coin, and I like that. I like that kind of thing.
Well, there's a really interesting moment actually before we get to the ending there, which is when Kim is sitting in a sort of office, and there's a pregnant woman that's opposite her, and the pregnant woman Kim begins to experience strange sensations. Her nose starts bleeding, which is a sign that you might be being scanned by somebody. And
Mm,
I thought it was quite an interesting revelation that, as it turns out, it wasn't the pregnant woman who was scanning her; it was actually her unborn baby.
yeah.
And the reason I bring that up and sort of going back is to feed back into the ending, where Revok actually explains why he's so against Consec. We discover that the drug ephemeral is actually being given to pregnant women, and this is how scanners are made. This is how they're created. They are injected with this drug, and their babies are born with the power of a scanner, and that is how they're created. In a similar way, that is how Vale and Revok came to be created, and their father is Dr. Ruth.
Like a lot of things in this film, it's something. Maybe it's to its credit actually that they don't explain everything or explore everything. But a fetus as a scanner. I mean, it must sit there doing this all day because it doesn't know what it's doing, does it? It's just sort of there. It's got this aspect to it, and it's using it. So yeah, very interesting moment.
In a way, it's going back to the body horror thing, but instead of it being some sort of corruption of flesh, it's something inside. It's an internal issue that's projecting outwards, and to me, that is sort of symptomatic, and I mean that in a good way of the kind of thing that Cronenberg does. I have to ask you, mate. For me personally, I have issues with the film. I keep mentioning it all the time, but going back, of course, I love the head explosion. This film has one of my favourite endings on it, or not necessarily the ending itself, but perhaps the final confrontation between the two of them. It's one of my favorite battles, if you like.
We do find out a lot in that meeting. They sit down and they have this talk, and we find out that everyone's father, and then they have this conversation, and it makes Dr. Ruth sound like not particularly the good guy who we thought he was.
Well, he goes a bit mad, doesn't he, towards the end? Which I again, sorry to backtrack so much, but I never really understood what happened to him at the end. Like he lost it, didn't he, a bit there?
He did. I was wondering, is he a scanner as well, or what? I don't quite know, to be honest. I don't know either. But the way that Revok describes everything, he's not necessarily a good guy in the way he's conducted himself, and he's let Cameron Vale sort of wander for years aimlessly until he needed him, and then he pulled him out. So I like the way that it sort of pulls the rug out from under you in that respect. But then, yeah, we have this battle. Like I said earlier, sometimes it seems like it's just people pulling faces at each other. This is something else entirely.
Yeah, this is it, guys. If you've been waiting through the duration of this movie, you saw what you liked at the beginning where it was quite extreme. If you're a gore hound, I think this is going to satisfy you, because what happens is Vale and Revok, they have this mind battle, and like you were saying, making funny faces, but this time there's something really tangible about this. Almost immediately, veins start popping out, and I mean, well, I don't mean popping out of the skin, but I mean veins start pushing up against the skin. I think it's a really cool effect.
Quite flawless. I didn't see the joins. Maybe I wasn't looking close enough. I don't know, but I was happy to go with it anyway. And just when you think you've seen what this battle is, sort of where it's going, they just keep ramping it up.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say it looks painful. It's not some. I mean, because you have the veins popping out, and then Vale has essentially been our hero through the film, and he is starting to come apart at the seams. and you can see it happening in front of you. The veins, his skin starts bleeding and coming apart and falling off. His face is falling apart. So they're having this battle. You can tell that Revok is enormously strong mentally,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
but Vale has, and Revok is affected as well. There are veins coming out of him, but Vale is the one who is looking the worst for wear, I have to say. He's looking bad. There's a hole that's developing in his heart. You can see it sort of fizzing through. And then Vale, he somehow finds the strength and he just becomes unbelievably powerful. His hands begin to become a flame. His body sets on fire and his eyes explode, which is one of my favourite effects in the movie, just because it's very simple. But if you thought that Vale would make it out of this alive, you were wrong, because in order to neutralize Revok, he basically has to sacrifice his body. And I just thought the way they ramped it up and the quality of the effects, in many ways it makes me wish that there'd perhaps been a bit more of that peppered through the movie. But at the same time, because you've been waiting for it for so long, I still think, having seen it, I guess like maybe my fifth or sixth time now, I still think it's just super effective.
It is. It's a great way to end it, and then of course we get that revelation that actually Vale won. He sacrificed himself to do it, his bodily self, but he's transferred his consciousness, which is another facet of their powers, I guess.
It is. Now I have to say, and I'm interested to know if you agree or disagree with me, and this is something that I feel quite strongly about. I think that was a cop out at the end. I feel like it was the kind of battle where they both needed to die, and I was never that happy that his consciousness, his mind, was transferred into Revok's body.
I can't say I felt that strongly, to be honest. I just took it for what it was, but it's interesting to hear you say that.
It's just the way I feel about it. Again, it's not a big deal. It's something that's quite minor to me, but it was just not something that I was ever particularly comfortable with. Do you have any more thoughts on the movie?
It's funny. I watched it today and I enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong, but it's one of those films that once you've watched it and you have time to kind of get your thoughts together, and having this conversation as well has helped me sort of solidify that in my mind, that I actually like it more than I probably did when I just finished watching it, Once a few things settle in your head, and I didn't think I'd watch it again, but now I think, well, actually I probably will. Maybe think is quite sad is there's two other films out that Cronenberg didn't have anything to do with, but I think it's quite a rich mythology there, and I'm not quite sure whether those sequels, I obviously haven't watched them because I'd only seen the first one today. I'm not sure whether those sequels really lived up to it.
I bought the box set you were talking about that was around a while ago, with Scanners 1, 2, and 3 in it. I have the box set. I have to say that, yeah, so like you were saying, there were two direct sequels, which is Scanners 2, The New Order, and Scanners 3, The Takeover. Now, neither of those films carried the characters from the original over, but they did carry the story over, the ephemeral and so on and so forth. I have to say, I don't think they're particularly good. I can't remember that much about them, but I remember there were a couple of nice gore effects in there. But I feel like they didn't have David Cronenberg's involvement. There was a spin-off series called Scanner Cop, and there were 2 films in that series, I think, with Scanner Cop and Scanners: The Showdown. And
wow.
Yeah, so it was a franchise, if you like. But I think the original is far superior to anything that came after it. I know you hadn't seen them, so I just wanted to sort of jump in and say that, yeah, I have seen them. And like you say, there's potential there for a rich mythology. I don't feel like it was carried forward in a particularly good way.
Well, that's a shame, because I think if Cronenberg had kept hold of it and it developed with him as a filmmaker, we would probably have seen him take this to some very interesting places.
Probably so, but then also, I don't believe David Cronenberg has ever made a sequel to one of his own movies, so it would be interesting. I don't think he's the kind of guy who particularly likes to revisit something. I think he puts the story out there and then moves on. But I'm not positive about that. Do you know if he's ever made a sequel?
Not that I can recall. But he's done a remake, so, but I don't know. Anyway, sorry, final thoughts for you then, mate.
Yeah, I think look, I've seen the movie a whole bunch of times over the years. It's not one that I would watch every year. I think it's you've got to be in the right mood for it. But I do think that it's a solid film. I think in the 4 years since Rabid, because that was 1977, this is 1981, Scanners was made. I feel like in those 4 years, I think you can still tell that it's the same filmmaker that made Rabid, because even at this point he's got more money to play with. It's a little bit bigger in scope, but I still feel like it's relatively grounded. It really wasn't until, I mean, this was his most successful movie until The Fly in 1986. And by then, I feel like his work has really become expansive, not only in the directing, on the directing side of things and the acting side of things, but also on the writing side of things. And but I feel that it's still a really solid film. I think if you paired these two together, Rabid and Scanners, and you watch them one after the other, I think you can see that there is a through line there of a really smart filmmaker who probably is still not absolutely firing on all cylinders. I think once you get to sort of Videodrome and like I said, The Fly, and even going back to The Brood, to be honest with you, there's a whole bunch of stuff there that I think that holds together a bit better. But there's some really cool stuff in this. There's a couple of nice gore effects in there, but it settles down in the middle. I think that might be the thing that puts some people off. There's better work to be found in his filmography, but I really enjoy it.
Yeah, it's a thumbs up from me, or whatever our equivalent of a thumbs up is. I don't know. It is that. So,
yeah,
yes.
Absolutely.
I'm happy with Scanners.
Yeah, and just to let you know that it is available on Blu-ray. You can get a Blu-ray release of it, and it's also part of the Scanners collection, which I did have a look on Amazon. I think that collection is still available, but I didn't take a note down of what the price of it is. But I mean, I personally, if you have a choice, I would just get the first one and not worry about the other two, unless you happen to find it in a shop somewhere. If they even sell DVDs in shops anymore, I don't know. If you can find it somewhere in a bargain bin, grab it and maybe watch the other two, or even the well, I guess there are 5 in total. But yeah, but it's on its own. Buy it on Blu-ray or DVD. I think you'll enjoy it.
So I think that's us in terms of our reviews this show. I hope you've enjoyed it. But we've got a couple of emails to read, right?
Yes, that's right. We have an email from your old friend, a person you used to work with quite a lot on your podcast, The Gentleman's Grindhouse. He was your co-host, Mr. Matt Hood.
That's right. He's the guy who I first took the plunge with into this whole podcasting thing. We did it together, and we had a good time. I really enjoyed putting that podcast together with Matt, and I miss those days, and now I'm stuck with you.
That's fine. That's fine, Tom. I think one day you will come to regret that opinion, because I feel that you're probably right. I'm so sorry, Tom, that I'm not as good as him. I heard that he was
okay.
a captain on a boat nowadays, and I'm just a lowly guy on the streets who sucks dick for a living.
So Matt says, "Hey Tom and Chris, just thought I would send you a little message to wish you good luck with the new podcast. I'm really looking forward to listening to you guys and finding out what terrible treasures you have in store for us listeners. May the airwaves stay strange and deadly for a long time to come, and may all your screams come true. Your good friend, Matt, the pun master." Thanks, Matt. I appreciate that, and I hope we hear from you again, get some feedback from you, get your thoughts. You and Tanya, always welcome to send feedback in. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Matt. And you were wondering what terrible treasures we have in store for you. It's a butt plug and a dream.
So you've got an email to read
now,
as well,
hang on
Chris,
a
right?
minute, because I've also got a... Slow your roll there, buddy. I've got an email. I got an email from Matt as well. And it was a personal email directed to me. It was nothing to do with you. And it says in the email, I hope Matt's okay with me reading this. It doesn't mention anything about, his knob or anything. But it says, "Hey, Chris, you have no need to worry, man. If Tom had given me a say in who stepped up for this cast, your name would have been the only one on my list. You guys are going to rock. You see, Tom, he believes in me. As for there being any worries about daftness, I like daft. If anything, I would have been dafter myself had I been more confident. You've got this. I know it. Matt." Matt, Thank you so much. I cannot possibly tell you how much that means to me to hear that from your good self. And I do feel like most of the people who liked you are going to hate me, but that's okay because I feel like hatred is good fuel. And ultimately, I feel happy. I feel honoured to carry on from your good self, and we'll be thinking of you as we go forward. Now, before you move on, my friend, I also have a very brief bit of feedback here from our good friend Rachel, also known as Lips Tattoo and Gore Kensington on Twitter. She has, more recently this year certainly, due to the very tragic death of Rick Mail, who was a massive hero of mine, certainly a massive hero of hers as well. She has sort of taken it upon herself to really pay tribute to him, organising a Rick Mail tribute night, and she's been a really good friend to us over the years. So she sent us just a little bit of feedback here. She says, "Hey guys, good luck in your new endeavour. Looking forward to listening to you discuss Cronenberg. But how about talking about Stella Artois and Beamish too?" Have a great show, Rachel. So I believe, Tom, that is all the feedback we've got at the moment. I think it will start trickling in more when we actually, put the episodes out. But for now, we have just a little bit more information to give you, and then we're going to be out of here, much to your relief, I'm sure. Our contact information, if you want to find us on the interwebs, you can do so at www.strangeanddeadly.com. Tom, where are you at?
Me, I'm at Twitter/GrindhouseTom. How about you?
I'm at twitter.com/thegoreboy, and you can also find our Twitter account, which we forgot to give you last time, I think. Our Twitter account is twitter.com/strangedeadly. No and in the middle, it's just Strange Deadly. You can go on there. The moustached man, the man of my dreams, has been replaced by a red skull, and by the time you pop on there, you'll see our new artwork, which is looking mighty fine indeed. And we have to thank Mr. Dark Ink for that. He's the darkest of inks, and he has made us some lovely artwork. Thank you very much, sir. I will miss the moustache guy, though. What was his name?
I think it was Moustache Guy.
Are you sure his name wasn't Barry?
As time goes on, we will... every show's got like its Facebook page and so on. We'll be building these things up as we go along. The website's a little sparse at the moment, but it's early days. Just listen to the show, and hope you enjoy it, and we'll build these things up as we go.
We absolutely will. And Tom, wait, stop the presses. Even though we're not printing a newspaper, stop them. We forgot to give the email address for feedback. If you want to email us, give us feedback, compliments, tell me how great I am, tell me how mediocre Tom's performance is. It's perfectly understandable. I feel that way too. But email us the feedback at feedback@strangeanddeadly.com. That's feedback@strangeanddeadly.com. And you don't just have to say nice things about us. You can also talk about the movies. You can tell us what you think of them. We always try to announce them ahead of time. And speaking of that, for our next episode, do you want to tell them what we've got planned for them, Tom?
So to continue with our double bill theme, we've got a couple of slashes this time round that are thematically similar. So we're going with Final Exam and Graduation Day. And it's a good time for Graduation Day, actually, because there's a new Blu-ray in the UK from 88 Films that's just come out. And so maybe if you've picked that up and you've seen it, then send us some feedback in.
Yeah, and we've both placed an order for Graduation Day. I actually already own it on DVD. I got because it was originally distributed, I believe, by Troma, and they didn't make the film, but they distributed it. And I have, I think, a Troma release of it on DVD somewhere. But I thought, well, I'll pick up the Blu-ray version of it anyway. And so we're going to be talking about that. I suppose kind of reviewing the Blu-ray in a way. Listen, guys, just to sort of... to kind of say what we were saying in the very first episode, where we're not being paid for this. We're not being paid to cover anything by any companies, and ain't nobody sending us anything. This is all coming out of our pocket. So if we want to be... I mean, I've heard the release is really good, so I'm not worried about it, but we'll always be honest. But yeah, being put out by 88 Films, they've got a bunch of slasher classics also coming out, which I actually sent them an email a few days ago asking them if all the films were uncut, and they wrote me back and said absolutely. So I'm looking forward to watching an uncut Graduation Day, I guess. And we've also got Final Exam, which I've never seen.
I've never seen it either. Do you know anything about it?
I believe it takes place on the final day of school when there's an exam happening.
Good, that's all I need to know. Okay. So that's been episode 2 of the Strange and Deadly Show. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed speaking to you, Chris.
Well, it's great that you've enjoyed speaking to me. I've had a moderately interesting time with you as well.
Good. Okay, we will see you next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everybody. And actually, not to spoil how I feel about Scanners, or about a particular character in Spanners, but Spanners? I'll start that again from where you left off. And she sent me a bracelet as well. Not a bracelet, what do you call the thing you put around your arm, Tom?
Wristband?
Wristband. Wristband.
Band
wrist. Oh dear, let me do the whole bloody thing again. Bracelet. What's wrong with me? Where you get a tribute night for him, and she sent me a wristband. Why can't I say the word wristband? Fucking hell! God damn! Am I gonna have to do that whole thing again, or is there a good place I can?
Just go. She sent me a wristband.
All right. I hope you can find a place to cut it in there.
I'll find it.
Right. And she sent me a wristband. And she sent me a wristband. She sent me a wristband. Let me try this again. And she sent me one of her wristbands. I can't say it seriously now. I'm not going to say wristband. I'm going to say something else. See, now I'm going to laugh no matter what I say. That's the problem. All right. Come on, boy. We've almost done this, Chris. Pick yourself up.
Continuing with our theme shows, this time we're going with a couple of slashers. Is Final Exam a slasher?
Let's have a quick look on Wikipedia. Let's see, Final Exam. Final Exam is a 1981 slasher film.
Okay.
But the director also wanted to go against the norm with the film and decided to feature very little on-screen graphic violence.
Oh, that's going to be
great.
fun then, isn't it?
Fucking hell.